Hello all, welcome to ASP .NET MVC5 Web Application Development course. Today we are going to explore ASP .NET MVC5. Let's start with an overview of Microsoft Web Technologies. .NET is a development platform made up of tools, programming languages and libraries for building many different types of applications. There are various implementations of .NET. Each implementation allows .NET code to execute in different platforms like Linux, Mac OS, Windows, ISO, Android and many more. So for example, this Xamarin here is for mobile app development. .NET Core, which is cross-platform and open source, is for app development when you want to consider a cross-platforms. .NET Framework, which is well-mature framework compared to .NET Core and well-time tested, supports for Windows-based development. .NET Standard is a formal specification of the API that are common across .NET implementation. This allows the same code and libraries to run on different implementations. So we are going to consider this .NET framework for this course. If you look at the architecture of .NET Framework, there are two major components: Common Language Runtime and the .NET Framework class libraries. Common Language Runtime or CLR is the execution engine that handles running applications. It provides services like thread management, garbage collection, exception handling, type safety, etc. Class library provides a set of APIs, common APIs and types for common functionality. It provides types for strings, dates, number, etc. And the class library includes APIs for reading and writing files, connecting to databases, etc. So if you write your code in C# and use that language compiler, for example, if you write in F# code, you use F# compiler, and you compile it, and it will get stored in your assembly as a CIL. When app is running, CLR take this assembly and uses just-in-time compiler to turn it into machine code, which is going to execute on your specific architecture. ASP.NET Framework is a subset of the .NET Framework. ASP.NET Framework supports for web developments. It contains web forms, web pages and MVC as site choices, and also web API sign-off for service choices. If you look at the overview of ASP.NET 4, it is a freely available web framework for building websites and web applications on .NET Framework. It basically extends the .NET platform with tools and libraries specifically for building web apps. So we'll come to the next question. What basically MVC design pattern? MVC is a design pattern which helps us to separate concerns concerns like the view, model and the controller. So these separations gives us multiple advantages. Therefore, basically, most frameworks incorporate MVC pattern to add those advantages into their framework. We'll have an example to explain this MVC pattern further. This is a scenario of user registration. We all know how user registration works. Basically, we require our users to fill a form and click a button to generate an HTTP request which will be handled in our server side. If our website uses the MVC pattern, this incoming request will direct to the controller. So controller will decide to which model we are to direct it. So the controller will see it's a user registration request, so user registration model will be directed. Now here the only concern of model is to deal with the data. It deals with the database and render the model which we are going to use in our view. So model will check whether this user is an already existing user. If not, it will save it to the database, and the controller might require to call a outside service to complete some work like sending back email for the user for the first time login, and then it will generate the view with a message that the registration was successful to be sent back to the user as a HTTP result. Now in this scenario, since these three layers are working separately, what are the advantages we are getting? If the look and feel of our site change over the time, will it affect to the controller or model? It will only affect to the view, and the other two layers works as usual. If the business logic changes, the change will only apply to the controller. Suppose now the business logic changes and it requires us to send SMS instead of an email. So at that point, the only change required will be for this controller to use a service to generate SMS instead of emails. But still model and view works as usual. Maybe you have to change the message which sent to the user, changing the message from email to SMS. Other than that, there won't be any changes. Likewise, if some changes applicable to model is going to be used other layers and their functionalities won't be changing. So the first advantage is it's very easy to manage MVC pattern website. The number two also, like each node is separated itself, we can simultaneously develop these layers using various people. For example, DBAs, people more experienced in database development can be used to develop the model layer. Front-end developers can be assigned to this view. So back-end developers can be used for this controller. So simultaneously, different teams can work to speed up this development. Now, because of this separation, this also supports the TDD, test driven development, where you first write all your test and then start development to pass those testers. So for each layer, because it is separated, we can write separate test and ensure while developing those tests we are achieving. So these are some of the advantages MVC pattern provides us. So this MVC is coupled with ASP.NET, comes with the ASP.NET MVC5. So it is a web framework based on MVC architecture. These are the advantages. Developers can build dynamic web applications using ASP.NET MVC framework that enables clean separation of concerns, fast development, and TDD friendly. Now we will consider each of these three components, model, view, and controller, more closer. This is a sample model class. So basically, in ASP.NET MVC5, a model is a C# class. You can see it is very similar to the class declaration, and here we have the public properties of that particular class. Then we have C# attributes used for the validation purpose. These validation rules are applicable in client side as well as server side. From one place you can do the validation, and wherever this class is used, those validations are applicable. Now for example, look at this title property. It's a string, but further details are provided in this attribute. The maximum length of this string to be 60 and the minimum length to be 3. So whenever user provide a title for our movie, we expect it to be the maximum of 60 strings or characters. In this release date, which is a date time, we have a display property. This attribute display name, wherever we are going to use this release date, a label will be like this in a readable format. And when you declare this data type as date, by default we can have HTML5 controls like calendar pop-up for our users when they are selecting the release date. Also in this display format, you can decide the format we want our users to see while viewing this release date. Also, if you look at this journ, which is a string, it has the string length limit to 30, and also it's a mandatory. This required attribute ensure that if you are to assign or create a movie, this journ is a mandatory field to be input. Also, we have used regular expressions in order to limit that this particular germ should have only characters, and the first character should be a capital character, and the rest can be either capital or simple with the space allowing. So like these validations also we can do using attribute. So we'll discuss more when we are discussing about annotations. Let's move to the controller. Controller again is a class which derived from the controller class. So it has C# methods, but here we call these actions. Basically, when request comes, controller actions will receive those requests based on our router configuration, and it will direct to the model, and these model details are passed to view. So basically control act like the administrator, who ensure that the request is properly responded. Now when you consider views, our views are racer syntax supported. So when you do a model binding to your view, you will be able to see the public properties in IntelliSense like that. So it's very easy, and less mistakes would happen. And these racer engines ensure that although our views have HTML plus C#, a pure HTML is rendered to browsers. So that's basically the introduction to ASP .NET MVC5. To follow along with me in this course, you will require a Visual Studio tool, any RDBMS. I basically use Microsoft SQL Server, so prior knowledge in SQL and C# language, and also prior exposure to web development will be an added advantage. So thank you for your time. We'll see you in our next tutorial.